Hey, what up, YouTube? It's Call It Back. Hey, man, I just got done watching Black Panther Wakanda Forever a couple days ago. So I've had time to sleep on it, think about my thoughts. And man, I absolutely loved the movie. I was moved by the movie. It was such a great time watching it. I enjoyed so many aspects of it, and I just had to make a video about it because, you know, my background is Black Panther is what got me pretty much into film. It was that final driving force for me to want to go out there and make movies of my own. So Black Panther has a special place in my heart. And to be completely honest, I watched the first Black Panther recently, and I hadn't seen it in a long time. I was slightly disappointed. I mean, obviously I've grown as a filmmaker, so I was able to see a lot of stuff that I wasn't able to see back then when I was just like 18 years old. So my excitement for Black Panther Wakanda Forever was pretty much non-existent. I wasn't expecting too much from this movie, especially without Chadwick Boseman, R.I.P. to Chadwick Boseman, without Killmonger, you know, Michael B. Jordan. I wasn't sure how they were going to go about this, and watching the first one, I wasn't sure if the character of Shuri would be able to carry this film. But man, was I pleasantly surprised, and I'm so glad that I was proved wrong. I think as of right now, you know, the overall themes that the movie takes off is something that immediately connected with me, that I really enjoyed. You know, that this movie is really a family drama. You know, it's almost like a political drama. It's this royal family that's grieving. And I love the comments that it makes on politics, you know, foreign powers, the West. It's about this royal family that's in the middle of a tragic loss, and they're trying to navigate being a freaking superpower nation with the most powerful and strong resource in the world, vibranium. And that creates a lot of problems, and it creates a lot of tension, you know, frustration among the family. And it just feels so real. The characters and the world that they're in feel so real and grounded. And I think that really made me buy into the story. So I think it was executed really well. And then, you know, going into that, I mean, rest in peace to Chadwick Boseman. I really wish he could have been in this movie. But at the same time, for this story in particular, I think it allowed, I mean, I'm not trying to sound insensitive with his death or nothing. I'm specifically talking about the character T'Challa, just the Marvel superhero. With him not being in this movie, it allowed all the other characters to be fleshed out more. I feel like I got to know and understand everyone a lot more compared to the first one. I was able to learn about the mother. I can't think of her name, Angela Bassett, who killed it. I was able to learn about her perspective. You know, there's a specific part in the movie when Okoye, the general of the Dora Milaje, came back without Shuri because Shuri got kidnapped, and the mother was angry and stripped away her status of general. And when I saw that part, I was like, man, no way. I was like, that doesn't even make sense. Why would you do that? But then she explained her part. She explained her perspective of things that happened in the first movie, things that she didn't agree with, that upset her. And, you know, how when T'Challa lost to Killmonger, Okoye and the Dora Milaje still served Killmonger, and they didn't try to rescue T'Challa or stand up for him. And I was able to see her perspective, and I was like, wow, you know, that stuff that was never in my head in the first movie. And so being able to learn about her more, being able to learn about Okoye and the Dora Milaje, Nakia, Shuri, of course, M'Baku and the Jabari tribe, you know, I feel like every character got fleshed out a lot more. And it made it so much more enjoyable. Every character played their role so well. I love the interesting fact that they put in the story that the younger generation has a hard time believing the culture, believing the religion that Wakandans have. You know, like Shuri questions the ancestral plane. She doesn't know if it's real. She questions the traditions. She's science-based. And so when she goes to the ancestral plane and sees Killmonger, man, it just brought that whole story point together. And I feel like that's something a lot of people can relate to, especially if you come from just any background that has a strong culture that spans back so long before you and your people. I just feel like that was a really nice touch, and it really worked well, especially with Killmonger bringing it in to hone that point home. I feel like that really, really worked well. Now, the freaking stars of the show, Namor and his people, and they introduced their people and Namor and their reasoning and why they do what they do, their origin story. I was so moved by it, and it was so freaking cool to see something like that. And it it just felt so awesome. And Ryan Coogler, such a good filmmaker and director, but every time these people were on screen, it created tension. And then once you knew of their presence, that tension rode, at least for me, pretty much throughout the entire film. Whenever we were nearby water in the film, I always felt on edge. Just the way they filmed this, the way they shot it, the sound design. Every time there was water nearby, I thought of it. It just did so well bringing that tension. And I feel like Namor and his people did such a great job. The script did such a great job. Their performance, just overall, I feel like it was such a great way to bring in an antagonist. And that's just what I'll call them right now, an antagonist, because I don't really see them as a villain. I don't know if I don't see them as an anti-hero, but it's just a straight up antagonist to the story. And man, were they so good. They were so good. But the one thing that I had a complaint with is I wish that Namor had a stronger intro and less exposition. When he gets introduced, he sneaks into Wakanda and he sees Shuri and her mother. And he goes up to him and he immediately starts explaining himself. He immediately starts explaining, this is why I'm here. This is why we should be allies or else we'll be enemies. He just starts breaking it down for them. And I get it could be part of his character. He's just trying to get to the point. But I feel like it would have worked better if they explained that story over time. In the beginning of the film, just make him a desperate villain. He needs Wakanda. So he just comes in like, I need you guys right now. I'm just trying to force them. And then once that story gets explained about how his people escaped colonization through water, they have vibranium too. That would have felt so much more powerful. Like if they would have saved all that for when Shuri went to go visit him underwater, I feel like that would have worked really well. And I would have been like, damn, this is their origin story. All of a sudden I understand. I know why they're desperate. I know why they're so freaking on the offensive. That's one complaint I had. I feel like Namor, the character, Tenoch Huerta, had a great performance and I really loved how he played the character. But I feel like the script didn't give him as much to work with as he should have had. Because a lot of his scenes were just filled with exposition. This is my people. This is why we do what we do. And it still worked, but I feel like it would have been a lot more powerful if they would have just gave that time. And just let him be a desperate villain. Kind of like Killmonger. There were certain parts where I felt the stakes felt more real, especially with Ironheart. I really enjoyed her character. I really liked her. People always hate for no reason, but I had no problems with her. I just feel like the stakes for her felt a little more real just because she had no training. She just put on a suit and was automatically a master at it, just perfectly beating enemies. I do feel like in certain parts, I feel like the stakes were more real. But again, Namor's people and the tension they bring around water really helped mitigate that problem, and I was able to look past it. Now, of course, when the rising action starts, it starts to become a typical Marvel movie with the fight scenes and all the intense action, which is fun to watch, and I think it was much better done this time than the first one. I know the first one had some rough CGI, but I really didn't see any bad CGI really in this film. It all looked beautiful, so I think it was all done well. But the reason that I still enjoyed all of it is because the movie had real stakes now. With Namor's people, Wakanda's people, everything that both sides are going through, I'm able to buy in. So I buy in and I believe it. And now I'm all in. I want to see what happens on both sides. So when Namor floods Wakanda, kills the mother, which was really tough. I was not expecting that. I'm bought in. I want to see what happens. And so when it comes back to Marvel's classic rising action and classic action scenes that a lot of people hate now and are bored of, it felt different and it felt real to me because I bought into the story, which is the goal. Quick side note, I ain't even gonna talk about this too crazy, but the music goes crazy. The music is so freaking good, and that's literally all I gotta say. The Black Panther song, when Shuri finally creates the heart-shaped herb and becomes a Black Panther, and you got that guitar going crazy, and then she jumps in with the suit. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. The climax, the climax of the movie felt a little rushed. I wish there was more, especially with the fight between Shuri and Namor. I wish that we could have focused on them more than the whole battle going on at sea, because that's what I really cared about. But at the same time, I think that final fight worked really well, especially with how it was filmed. There was like an interesting format change. You know, it went a little more widescreen, I noticed. And then there was a lot of motion blur, which I'm sure was to help the CGI, but it looked really cool. And it just, you know, the way it was shot with that format change, the motion blur, I think it all built this just climactic feeling that I think Ryan Coogler just killed. He absolutely killed it. I do wish there was more. There were some certain parts that I was just like, okay, that's weird. Like when Shuri had Namor on the ship, and then Namor starts breaking the ship to break out and get to water, and she's just kind of like standing there talking to her AI, asking what the damage is instead of stopping him. Like little moments like that, I'm like, bro, what are you doing? Like, what's going on here? I think that climax worked really well. I think it was a good resolution. I think it also proved the point that that Namor is a clone character to Shuri. If you don't know what a clone character is, I'm not going to explain it here. You'll just have to go find out. But Namor was a clone character to Shuri. They both had similar aspects. And Shuri, seeing Namor acting how he did, taught her about herself. You know, they were both people almost at the climactic ending, forcing people to fulfill their own prophecies. Like Shuri went up to M'Baku and was like, I need you to do this for me. I want vengeance. I don't care if we're going to be at war forever with Namor's people. This is what I want to do. And that's the exact same thing that Namor was doing with Wakanda. And so I think that point was made really well towards the end of the film. It just emphasized that point that Namor was a clone character to Shuri. Killmonger is sort of a clone character to Shuri. I think the characters just overall were really built well, and it had a lot of payoff. And then the ending, you know, once that ends and then it starts slowing down and they're wrapping up all the characters to the film, it started to slow down a lot. And I feel like that's the hardest part, is how to know when to end a movie. But I think you have to pick and choose your battles. Not everything needs a visual conclusion. You don't have to wrap up the story with Agent Ross, Nakia, Namor. You know, I mean, you have to pick and choose your battles. You know, maybe Agent Ross isn't a good place to end it. Just show it in a montage. I know you're trying to get the joke off or whatever. It really does slow down the pacing of the film when all I care about is Shuri and Namor. I mean, it's a hard thing to do when you have that many moving parts, but you have to pick and choose your battles, choose your priorities of who you want to wrap the story up with, and wrap it up. But when it did get to Shuri, I really did enjoy how they ended it with that silent ending at the beach, burning her mourning clothes, the introduction of T'Challa Jr. I think it really wrapped it up well. And when I was in the movie theater, the audience clapped, and it felt really well deserved. And shout out to Ryan Coogler and the whole cast. They all just absolutely killed it. I need to go watch it again. I haven't seen a movie that made me want to watch it twice, back to back, in a long time. And I think Ryan Coogler as a filmmaker has gotten so much better. He's easily one of the best filmmakers of this generation. He's a huge inspiration for me. And shout out to the whole cast. Rest in peace to Chadwick Boseman. Go watch this movie. Get your own opinion. But don't hate just to hate, just like everyone does nowadays. It's Kala. We out.